experience over 35 years of teaching literature that has sexually explicit material in it is that it winds up being a good experience for almost everybody involved, even if it's uncomfortable while you go through it.
To answer sort of part of Catherine's original question, I mean, I think there are ways in which it is sensational. People have mentioned that he has this strong personality, and people talk about his having a certain kind of swagger and arrogance, and he talks about bodies a lot. It's a very important thing to him as a military man, and in some of the descriptions, it's very clear that he takes great pleasure in talking about the physique of people involved. And so, I mean, there's a certain kind of more of exhibitionism there. Nevertheless, I think that when he has that, his experiences there, they are genuine. He is, it will. I mean, you do have a range of individuals in the classroom who have had experiences or not, and will talk about these experiences or not. But they are in a college setting now, and it is a time in which we can begin to talk about something that is a part of the human experience in an adult way. And so, you just don't giggle every time somebody says the word orgasm or something. But this is a part of it. But to have these, and you do, the sexuality of classes and so on, to try to talk about it in a way that they have not often done when they're, a bunch of friends out on Friday night.
I think one of the reasons why he gets so explicit, other than the fact that he likes to, is that I think he's trying to explain how his encounters with women differ from his encounters with men. And I think he's trying to sort of prove that it's by nature that I'm in this way, by describing his feelings during his encounters with men and women. And I think that may be why, in addition to his exhibitionism, why he's going into so much detail in some of the scenes. In some other scenes, he just completely glazes over it and doesn't really talk about it at all. But in certain ones, he actually does get into it. I think it's important also to talk about the fact that there is a sexual assault situation that occurs, and I think that can bring up a lot of emotions for potentially some of your students, but it could also serve for a really good discussion on how he reacts to it. In the beginning, it happens during what they call Hell Week, right before he's recognized as a cadet, and he basically brushes it off in the sense of, I have other things to worry about, and doesn't really think about it too much until later, when he's actually thinking to himself about how he is having these feelings towards men and not having the sort of support system that he created for himself, and he almost identifies with the people who attacked him, in saying that he could imagine what it would be like to have these feelings and to sort of act them out in a way that would be more appropriate for the situation. In almost saying that it would be more appropriate to sexually assault somebody than to actually be gay. And I think that says a lot about what people think about being gay. A lot of times when we're talking about homophobia, it's actually that we're talking about gender. And a lot of, even in what he talks about civilian gay men as squishy and sort of unattractive. And I think it's almost like you have to be the right kind of gay. He's talking more about homosexuality as an act rather than as an identity. And when we talk about identities and who people are, we're talking about gender. Like the policing of homosexuality and the identity of being gay or lesbian is a lot about gender. It's, this woman is not feminine enough, this man is not masculine enough. And the reason why sex acts between, men is seen as a bad thing is because it's almost as though it's like the ultimate betrayal of your masculinity to become almost submissive is sort of how it's seen in this situation. And it gives a lot of sort of insight into homophobia and the way that we police gender in our society. And I think that can bring up a lot of discussion in your classes.
Just really quickly, could you talk a little bit? So this is clearly, Lane Cool is not necessarily a perfect ambassador for a given community. I think we use that phrase of the giant scarecrows as if there was a single one. But if we could talk a little bit about what this is as a memoir. I mean, Chris talked about this is a good example of one person's story. What can we expect from a memoir? What sort of genre is this? And how can we think about this as his story? What does it do as a memoir?
I think it's fair to say that sexuality, right in Mendel's sexuality is the key issue for him in the book, and that's why he selected passages that he has selected. He selected many others too, but the focus of his selection has been based on that. I think one of the most interesting things to do with students is to ask them to write brief memoirs yourself. Not 300 pages, but to see, and then just to examine for themselves what items they select. And the items that they've selected could have to do with celebrating the family that they grew up in. They could have to do with celebrating being smart. They could have to do with celebrating being a rebel in high school. I mean, there's some narrative outside of that person that they see themselves as part of. And just when they begin to try to pick up details that they want to share, or even in the case of not sharing, in order to get some self-understanding. Writing a memoir helps you decide what categories you think you fit in. And if students try writing somewhat of a memoir in your class, it will help them realize that he has been selected in deciding what kind of narrative he's making out of. If you read a Hollywood biography, for example, what they mostly talk about the other famous people that they knew. It's as if just because you're an actor, that's your job in a memoir. That's the narrative we want from a Hollywood biography. We constrain ourselves in thousands of ways in life, and this is a good illustration of how we constrain ourselves.
And if you read the author's note at the beginning, he says this is not a conventional memoir. He says, I wanted to write something that's true to life, and he does want to represent what it's like to be in the military, to be in camp, to be a cadet, who's leading this secret life, to have to deal with the biases against him as a gay man. But he says, in part, I had changed